A good fisherman can take an average rod and look good, but a great fisherman cannot take an average pair of waders and make them not leak.
Because I've done that. I've pinched pennies where I shouldn't have, and I now own 5 sleeping bags, where if I just spent the money on one, the good one, I wouldn't need the other 4.
I think guys cut themselves just short trying to save a little bit of money.
It ends up being 27 miles of river, and I bet we floated
27.
There's a place to save money when you're buying gear, and there's a place to spend money when you're buying gear. These guys that need to have the big name fly rod and a pair of regular waders, it's almost laughable. I mean, it's obvious that they don't really truly understand what's important out here. I was gonna say, if we left that one camera rolling on that last one, minus the F-bombs and a couple swear words, we almost had something rolling there.
Hey guys, welcome to the Gritty Angler Podcast. I'm back with Brian Oakland from Got Fishing and Patrick Kissel. Had you guys on the podcast before. You guys had some great stories to tell. And in chatting with you, you have more stories that I want to get into eventually. Like hardcore remote stuff that you guys do. Yeah. Maybe some stories that are mistakes that your clients have made that are big boo-boos that we can all learn from. Gear related, location, whatever it might be. But
we got a couple.
Yeah.
Was it about a 4-hour podcast today?
That's right.
Get them all in.
Yeah.
I've charged up 6 batteries for the camera, so
good.
We're good until those run out.
Good.
But you're getting ready to go on a pretty cool trip here shortly.
Yeah.
Mexico.
Yeah, I am heading to La Pescadora, Mexico to catch a Grand Slam. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm pretty excited about it.
He didn't say hoping to, he said he's going to.
Oh yeah. Why else would I be going? Yeah. Well, we'll see. Obviously, I like to lean into it with confidence, but that's the beauty of this trip, is it's very possible to catch a Grand Slam in one day.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm going down there for all of the reasons, to enjoy the scenery, to check out the lodge, to check out the fishery, because I know that it's incredible. But yeah, while I'm down there, I might as well complete the Grand Slam, catch them all in one day, and make that happen.
So you booked a 48-hour flight because you're going to do it in one day.
Come right on back.
Come right on back, yeah. I gave myself 2 days. I don't want to be overconfident, so yeah, I may not get it done the first day, but plan on getting it the second, and then I'll fly home.
I can't wait to hear the stories.
Good man, so... Guys, call Brian at Got Fishing. He guarantees a 24-hour Grand Slam. So
guarantee a shot at it. Whether you hook up, that's up to you.
You'll see those 3 fish.
You will see them.
They might be spooked already or going the other way, but
you get an opportunity.
But it is January. It's dang cold outside, so it's a good time to head south.
It is. Yeah, it's perfect time. We do a lot of steelheading around here, and so we spend plenty of cold mornings and evenings standing in the river. So it'll be nice to be standing on a boat in my shorts, casting in the sun for sure.
Nice.
I'm looking forward to it.
So you guys are both hardcore fly fishermen. You've been on a lot of great trips all over the world. So some questions I have for you, and kind of what I want to get into today is gear.
Yeah. And
especially for the DIY guys, because you guys you've made mistakes. You know of people that have made mistakes. You've kind of seen it all, both in your business, Brian, with Got Fishing, and Patrick in your guiding business.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick, you've spent a lot of time in Alaska. You've probably seen some crazy mistakes, had some crazy run-ins with whatever, gear failures, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, getting into it, obviously the most important one, that talk to anyone on the street, they're going to tell you bring a rain jacket, because it does tend to rain in Alaska, and more so in some parts than others. But clients sometimes in the morning would be like, is it going to be cold out there? Should I bring this? Should I bring that? And it's like, we're on a boat, I got plenty of room, bring it all. I got a dry bag with extra dry clothes if someone goes in, extra rain jacket, all that stuff. But, especially if you're doing a do-it-yourself, float trip, or a 5-day where you're out there, where you're not going back to some, civilization where you can dry your clothes out, have a legit rain jacket, legit gear that you know, you're not gonna get soaked out there, because come day one, if you're soaking through and wet, it starts to not become fun anymore. And it doesn't matter how tough you are. When the rain starts dripping down your legs to your socks, and your socks are wet in your waders, you start getting cold, and it starts to not be fun. So
yeah, for me, so if I had a list of the top 5, top 10, good rain gear would be in the top 3 for sure.
For sure.
Because when you get wet, you get cold. And when you get cold, one, it can be dangerous and life-threatening. But 2, you're going to be calling it quits early. You're going to be cutting your trip short because you're cold, you're uncomfortable, and it can just ruin the whole experience.
Yeah, that's the nail on the head. You're fishing. I've been out there plenty of times, and the car's close, so you just walk back an hour early.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you're out there, or you're fishing and you're cold and your hands are numb, and you should be changing a fly because you haven't caught anything for a minute, but you just keep flipping the same crap you got on because your hands are so cold that you can't tie the fly on anymore.
Or don't want it.
Yeah,
just miserable.
don't want it. You're not paying attention to the run and what you should be fishing, and yeah, everything starts snowballing, and boils down to keep yourself dry and comfortable out there.
Yeah, 100%. And I can speak from experience. I've been in one situation that was, well, 2 that were potentially life-threatening because I was that wet, I was that cold, and it's because I didn't have the right gear.
There's situations that you get into where you do have that luxury. I brought the wrong rain jacket, or maybe I didn't bring it, or I woke up and it was sunny, and I thought it was going to be okay, and I headed out into the river or whatever it was, and the weather turned, and I have the ability to get back to the car. But on some of the stuff that we're talking about, where you're 5, 6, 8, 10 miles deep, you're on, some DIY trip into a lake or a river, and it starts raining, or the weather, turns on you, it can be a really big deal. In some instances, it can be life-threatening, but if anything, you're in there for 4 or 5 days and your gear starts to fail on you, whether that's your rain gear, your sleeping bag, your fly rod, whatever it is, it's going to ruin your trip without a doubt. Then there's the whole safety thing too about, once your core gets too cold, and hypothermia slips in, and as we all know, hypothermia is not one of those things that you think is happening to you. It's typically your buddy has to recognize it within you, and so it's all fun and games, and we have tons of laughs. We'll talk about a few of them today, but there's the serious side too, that having the wrong gear can be a fatal mistake.
Yeah, and when it comes to rain gear, I would definitely, guys, do your research on the rain gear.
No question.
And read the reviews, because on one instance I was on an elk hunt and the heavens just opened, and I mean opened. The trails turned to rivers. I was walking through ankle deep water all day, and what I thought was good rain gear wasn't. I mean, after 2 hours it started coming through.
Right.
4 hours later, I was soaked to the bone, and I'm still a couple miles from my four-wheeler, and then had to ride that back to the truck, and anyways, it was a bad situation. Right. But I thought it was good, and it was not.
Right. In today's day and age, with reviews and websites and all of these different gear junkies that are out there testing stuff, it doesn't take but 15, 20 minutes, half an hour of Googling something, and you're going to get the top 10 rated, and why. Why they're number 1 or number 3.
But what we talked about on our last podcast, going to Alaska in some of these remote, deep, trips that you can take, and even here in the lower 48, places like Idaho, Montana, where you can get really remote.
Yeah.
You don't want to be going back there for a whole week with crappy gear. So rain gear is definitely one that I would say don't skimp on. Obviously, it's got to fit your budget, but buy the best that your budget can afford.
Yeah. Or you're going to be buying a couple.
Yes.
You're going to end up buying a couple rain jackets and not be happy with any of them, and have spent the money to just buy a good one right away.
Yeah, that's it. I was just going to say, or more.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to save a buck on some of this. There's a place to save money when you're buying gear, and there's a place to spend money when you're buying gear. And when it comes to rain jackets, and some of the layerings that we need, polypropylene and your sleeping bag, I'm buying top of the line. I'm buying. I mean, I might want to buy it on sale, or I might try to find a buddy with some pro form. But bottom line is I'm buying good gear.
Oh man, I can tell you to your point. I can tell you. Well, I can show you. I can take you out to my garage right now, and show you my collection of boots, hunting boots, hiking boots, and my collection of sleeping bags. Because I've done that. I've pinched pennies where I shouldn't have, and I now own 5 sleeping bags, where if I just spent the money on one, the good one, I wouldn't need the other 4.
Exactly.
You loan the other 4 out to your buddies that are just getting into it, so they understand the value of good gear.
They all got to struggle.
Right.
Struggle like you did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, part of it is to shave weight or stay within a weight limit, right? Especially if you're packing in on your back.
Yeah.
You want to go light. But the really good warm sleeping bags that are also light, $300-400.
Yeah.
600, 700, $800.
Yes. They can be that much.
Yeah, you got to decide, how deep, how far do I want to go in? How much of a DIY guy do I really want to be?
Yeah.
And, make good decisions from there.
So me, on an elk hunt 3 years ago, I only spent $200 on a sleeping bag and to shave weight. So I was within my weight limit, but the whole week I was cold. I was cold at night because it wasn't as warm as it should have been. So you're going to sacrifice.
Yeah, you are, absolutely. Yeah. I had a buddy that I went hunting with actually last season. We grew up in Montana together. He had kind of stepped away from the game and now wants to get back into it. And he showed up in a lot of the old camo gear that he had back in the day. And there's nothing wrong with the patterns. It still works. But it was a cotton blend. And it wasn't too long. We didn't even get caught in a rainstorm. It had rained before, and just walking through the bushes and the leaves just literally soaked him. And I'm running around the mountain absolutely fine, no desire to go back to camp. And he's a tough nut, but you could tell that this isn't as much fun for him because he's soaking wet, just wrong gear.
Yeah, and it only takes one experience like that.
100%. Next year he'll have Sitka or Kui or one of those for sure.
Yeah. Well, gear today is so good. It's a game changer, right? Versus 20 years ago. We were eating lunch earlier. I was telling you guys a story, and I may have shared this on an earlier podcast, but 20 years ago when I was in college, I used to do a lot of fishing on the Snake River up in Idaho. And back then, guys went hunting and fishing in blue jeans, right? And we all had our white cotton socks and cotton t-shirts, and cotton ruled the day.
Yep.
Well, this was early January, and Buddy and I, Brian, we'd left right after college, after classes, and just zipped up for an evening of fishing. And we were kind of remote. We were 30 miles from town, but 3 miles in on a power line road. And long story short, I'd fallen in the river, and right up to my waist, and my blue jeans, within 2 minutes of coming out of the water, they were a brick. I mean, they were solid. Yeah. And to make matters worse, when we called it, we called it right after that, right? Because I'm freezing, I'm cold, and we go up to the car, and the car won't start.
As all adventures will, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he'd left the lights on. We come to find out battery's dead, so we're stranded. Fortunately, somewhere we found a pocketbook of matches, and there's 3 little matches in it, which is a miracle. We made the biggest fire you've ever seen, and we know we're there for the night, right?
Right.
We're like, it's getting dark, so we're just going to stay here, and we'll walk out in the morning. If our wives, we were both married at the time, newlyweds, if our wives don't call the police and send someone to look for us.
Which I hope they do.
We were like, well, we'll find out how much they love us, right? Maybe this first year of marriage wasn't all that. No, but we had to make the biggest fire. It was so cold. It was 20 below. I mean, every 30 seconds, we're flipping sides, front to back, all night long.
Yeah. Good old cotton.
Yeah. We both caught our limit of fish, and so we ate all 8 fish that night. I mean, it gave us something to do, and just it helps you stay warm too.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're eating.
Definitely.
But all that cotton was miserable, especially if you get wet, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no excuse for that today, and I will not take anything cotton into the backcountry.
Yeah, I mean, it's taboo today. If you're going into the backcountry and you have cotton on, you're a rookie. And there's no place for cotton.
100%.
Yeah.
So Patrick, getting back to Alaska and your experience up there, you just mentioned rain gear. Name a couple of the biggest mistakes, rookie mistakes you see guys make when it comes to gear, whether it's their waders, boots, packs, maybe not bringing waterproof bags, rod reel. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see?
There's definitely things you can get away with and things you can't. Obviously, rain gear. We're fishing, so waders, you know. I'm not going to spit out a brand that's the best, but, you know, there's 3 top brands out there, and one kind of dominates the fishing industry, so you can get at which one I'm getting at. Mm-hmm. That works for me because of, you know, partly how it fits. It's reliable. They're going to fix it as soon as, you know, I sent a pair in again this year. They fixed them, put new booties in for me, you know, free of charge, all that good stuff. But the other brands out there are good too, and, you know, if they fit you right and you like them, good. But, you know, waders are expensive too, you know, just like rain gear. And having something that fits you right.
You're in them all day. That's the other thing. You're not just putting them on for a couple hours. You're putting them on in the morning and you're taking them off in the evening. So they're an extension of you on these trips.
And don't forget your patch kit for them, because I mean, when you're going remote, there's a good chance you might puncture a hole in them.
Mm-hmm. Waders leak.
Right.
Yeah.
Number one reason people buy a new pair of waders is
they leak.
Their last one started leaking.
Yeah.
Right. And going along with that is just, you know, what you're wearing underneath. Don't wear blue jeans. For one, it's going to be super uncomfortable. You're going to sweat. And if you have a leak and your blue jeans get wet, they're wet for the whole day, or the whole trip.
Yeah, and then they're cotton and they're sucking heat from your body.
Exactly. So, you know, obviously good wool, capelline, all that good stuff underneath is important. I can tell you a mistake I made on a trip. This one time.
You're fired.
Okay,
He didn't know about this.
This was a do-it-yourself one, but it all turned out fine. But I had went up to basically this kind of goes along with preparing for the trip, right, and kind of knowing what you're getting into before you do. Like Brian said, woke up, it was sunny, got out there, it started raining, so I didn't bring my jacket. Well, should have brought it anyways. But so we got some intel from a good friend of mine about this river. And he kept saying that he rafted it. So I'm thinking, okay, I got this little raft. It's a one-man, but brought my girlfriend up there, and he did it in an overnight trip and did a longer section, but I found a shorter section and kind of looked at the map and haphazard put it together and was like, we're going to go up there and do this day float. You know, I got a cooler. It's like I said, it's a one-man raft, but I threw a cooler on it, threw my girlfriend on it, myself on it, all of our stuff.
They're still together.
Yeah.
So there's the mistake right there.
No,
to learn here.
So, you know, I look at the map and I'm like, there's a ton of grayling in here, but we're after these kings. Got the intel from my buddy a little bit. I'm like, well, I'm just going to run my own shuttle. You know, we got tons of light in Alaska, so we'll get up there early, drop her off with the boat, borrowed a fat tire bike from another buddy. And I thought the pedal was going to be about 7 miles, and I thought the flow was going to be about 15. So a long day. Well, it turns out I'm driving to the drop point where I put my Jeep, and I'm looking at the miles, and I'm like, holy shit, this is 15 miles. So I already knew I was in for it. I get on that bike and start pedaling. I mean, as hard as I could, you know, as fast as I could. And I don't think we put on the water till about noon. And she's like, where the heck have you been? You know, she took a nap and was hanging out. And,
this is just the beginning.
So the shuttle was super long. Thankfully, I brought some food, you know, for the day. Not a ton of food. Brought my GPS, which was definitely a lifesaver because, you know, it started out real bony, and there was the first mile, 2 miles, it was like no floating and all walking, you know, over these rocks, and we're carrying rafts and we're stumbling in the river. And you know, after about 3-4 hours, I'm like, I wonder how far we are. We fished one spot, caught some grayling, but like realized we needed to kind of keep moving, and I thought there were some tributaries was going to make it bigger. And it was like the first 5-6 miles was 5 miles of dragging and maybe a mile of floating, right? So I get the GPS out and I'm like really start looking at this thing, and I'm like, oh, like this is way farther than we thought. So long story short, we keep dragging, didn't hardly fish at all, dragging and floating and dragging and floating, and we get to camp, or to where we decided to sleep for the night because we weren't planning on it. Made a fire, ate some food, and that was at about 12.
This was a day trip, not an overnight trip.
So it's 12:30, and we're far north, way north of Anchorage, up towards Fairbanks. Well, not quite Fairbanks, but anyway, so 12:30 now, it's like getting dark, and I was like, I'm spent. Let's just crash here for a couple hours. It's gonna start getting light at 3, and we'll keep going. So got up at 3, slept on that raft, no blankets, anything, super cold.
Back to good waders.
Yeah, good waders. Both of us had good rain jacket. All that. It rained a little bit that night. Luckily had 2 extra puffies, kind of clothes to keep us somewhat warm that night. But woke up cold and was just like, grabbed the raft and started dragging. And so long story short, it ends up being 27 miles of river, and I bet we floated
27.
So she had to be back, so I had some guide trips going out, and she had to be back for her work. But we basically got off the river that following night at like 8:30. Then had to drive over, grab the bicycle and drive all the way back, drop her in Seward, and then I got like an hour of sleep before my trip that next morning. But we are still together, and we didn't see any kings until about that last mile. But really, I guess what it boils down to is kind of...
And the moral of the story is?
Know what you're getting into, So my buddies were saying rafts. Well, I was thinking like a 12-foot raft he's got. Well, he was talking pack rafts. So I was in the right thing, but not, So know what you're getting into. Luckily we had some stuff, enough food, good gear to stay warm, but kind of plan your stuff out a little better than we did. And I've done that kind of crap a lot.
Oh yeah. I think anybody that spends any amount of time out in the wilderness knows you've always got to have an extra couple power bars or something in your pack in case.
Right.
You've always got to have matches and a headlamp just in case.
Totally.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, and we had that, so that was good.
Yeah.
I'm always a guy who, if I can fit it in, if I'm going into the backcountry and I got a pack and it's like kind of empty, even if I have everything I need, I start like filling up the void spots and the holes with extra bars or an extra jacket. And 9 times out of 10 you don't use it, but yeah, Aaron,
but that one time you need it.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're darn glad you did.
So.
Brian, what about you from gut fishing? I'm sure you've heard a lot of stories or had feedback from clients that, either didn't listen to your gear list or whatever.
It won't happen to me. Yeah, that's a big one. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good idea, but it probably won't happen to me, so I'm fine. And I think the big one for me is really 2. One is they will bring that pair of waders that have been sitting in the garage. We were talking about earlier. Most fishermen don't get out as much as they even think that they do. I mean, in reality, they're out casting, 7 to 20 times if you're an active fly fisherman. So these waders, they're either sitting in your fishing bag or, they're probably not in the best condition. And a lot of guys are bringing them up. And now you're wearing them 7 days in a row. You're wearing them all day long and you find, that they fail or a seam fails. And when you're up in Alaska or you're over in Russia or you're over in Chile and your seam blows out, it's a big deal. That's why I would say in the top 5, you always want to bring duct tape. But anyway, a seam fails on a pair of, cheaper waders. Again, you can still get them at, your name brand stores, but they just don't have the years behind them like some of the other ones we were talking about. And guys will roll the dice and bring those, and they pay for that. The other one would be bringing one rod. Bringing your 1 5-weight or bringing your 1 8-weight and blowing that thing up, day one.
Yeah.
So then 2 things happen. Either A, you're somewhere where you're not going to get another rod and you're done, or you're constantly leaning on your buddy to share and now you're the irritator.
Yeah.
Or, and this happens a ton, you're in the vicinity of a sportsman's type store and you're running down there and getting some 2x4. You know, some club for $75, you know, and having to use that for a week. So, big one would be bringing only one rod, waders that are not sufficient. And I would even go back to the rain gear. I mean, we've been joking around about it, but I see a lot of guys that'll buy ponchos or maybe buy 2 or 3 ponchos so that they have a backup.
Yeah.
You know, a backup piece of junk is just that.
You're going to get wet in a poncho.
You're going to get wet in a
It's not
poncho.
comfortable to
Yeah.
Or there's the new all-in-one, the pants and the jacket and the hood. You know, but again, that's to be worn in a drizzle. But when you get into a torrential rain,
walking from the street to your house.
yeah, that's what that gear's for. But not sitting in front of a boat for 8 hours with the rain coming down on you. And like we were talking about earlier, bad rain gear will fail. It'll start soaking through. Now your layering is cold. Now your core is starting to get cold. Now you're no longer having any fun. So waders is a big one. Fishing rod would be probably the other one that a lot of people don't bring. In addition to in addition to underestimating the weather that's going to come in.
Either the wrong size or not bringing a backup rod, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Going along with what Brian said is about the old waders, fly line's one to look at that I saw a lot. Usually, you know, clients are fishing my stuff anyways, but sometimes clients would bring things and it was like, your fly line's like cracked, it's garbage. He's like, well, I've had it for 5 years and it's like, well, if you're going on a trip, especially, you know, if you're paying for a trip or a big do-it-yourself one that you've planned out, buy a freaking $75 fly line and just put a new fly line on there and be done with it, you know, because that, again, you're going to get out there and your fly line sinking and now you're struggling all week with a crap fly line trying to make it work.
God forbid you're being spooled.
Oh,
you have
yeah.
half that fly line out in the river and it snaps on you. Yeah. Might as well break your rod in half. I mean, it's over then, you know.
I know a lot of expert fly fishermen that tell me fly line to them, the right fly line, good fly line is more important than a good rod.
Oh, absolutely.
And more important than a good reel. Because most guys can make an average rod and reel work. Mm-hmm. But if you have the wrong fly line or bad fly line, it's not going to perform the way you need it to perform.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not going to lay down. The fish are going to see it. It's not going to have the durability once you get the fish on.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not going to be able to cast it right.
Correct.
So it's got to be the right line, right weight, size, and in good condition.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest mistake that people make is that there's a fine line between saving a little bit of money and buying right. And the delta is usually not that big. You know, it's people are just buying that fly line that's right a couple of dollars cheaper than the fly line that you should be buying, or they're buying the rain jacket that's just a little less expensive, when in reality, if you did step it up a little bit, and you know, a lot of these things you have to save for. I mean, guys work hard for their money for sure. This is some of the stuff that we're talking about here, and some of the brands that we're talking about but not mentioning are not free. You know, they are expensive. But if you save the money, take the extra time, you're only having to buy it once. I think that's the other big thing. You know, I like to buy gear that's warranted. So when I do snap a rod, or if I do rip a rain gear for whatever reason, all I have to do is return it and they're going to fix it.
Yeah.
That's a big one right there. But I think guys cut themselves just short trying to save a little bit of money. And my advice would be, instead of buying 3 items today at the store, just buy the one and buy it right.
Yeah.
And come back and get the second item when you can afford to do it right. Then when you've got your arsenal, you're not having to replace it every other year. You've got good gear, and it's something that now you have for years to come.
Yeah, 100%. You know, we've kind of already touched on this, but I'll just reiterate this. There's a handful of items that I would not skimp on. And number one is your outerwear, like your rain jacket, your jackets, your waders, and your boots. Items that you're living in that need to keep you dry and warm. You cannot skimp on that. If you need to save money, buy an average rod, buy an average reel, because you're not going to notice that big of a difference.
You're not.
And it's not essential to you having a successful trip.
Right.
These guys that need to have the big name fly rod and a pair of regular waders, it's almost laughable. I mean, it's obvious that they don't really truly understand what's important out here.
Yeah.
And that a good fisherman can take an average rod and look good, but a great fisherman cannot take an average pair of waders and make them not leak.
Right. Yeah. Or be uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Yeah. I did a hike a few years ago. My boots had broken down on me, right? My wading boots, and I didn't have time to go buy a new pair. I was literally walking out the door. Anyhow, I grabbed my neighbor's boots, he's a half size smaller than me. And my buddy and we ended up doing this way longer hike than we planned to, up to Slough Creek in Yellowstone. And I did that all day in boots that were half size too small. And I paid the price with blistered feet. Like it started off exciting, and by the end of the day, I was just done. I was done, wanted to get back to the truck. My feet were blistered and sore. But again, the rod and reel I had that day didn't matter, but it was my outerwear.
100%.
Waders, boots.
100%. Yeah, I think a lot of guys getting into this have it wrong. They do go buy the super expensive rod, the really expensive reel, then they put cheap fly line on it. Then they start scaling it down when it actually needs to be turned over. And it's your waders and your rain gear and everything that we've been saying that needs to be at the higher end. And then you can have an average fly rod and reel and still be out there kicking some butt, taking some names, and having some fun.
Yeah. Especially, for guys, say you're going on maybe a once-in-a-lifetime type trip, right? You are taking that trip to Alaska or down to New Zealand or Chile or wherever it might be. You don't want to show up with crappy gear that's going to ruin your trip or can ruin your trip or make you uncomfortable. And so a resource they have is guys like you. They can call up Got Fishing, whether they book with you or not.
Correct.
Yeah, I'd say I was more than willing to tell a beginner, tell a veteran, answer any questions. If I don't know it, I'll look it up as far as gear goes, or some backcountry things or anything. Or if you're in the Boise area or wherever I am, if I'm in Colorado or Alaska and you happen to be coming through, give me a call, hit me up on Instagram. I'd fish with you. I'll show them what I know or answer questions or anything. So yeah, totally a resource.
Yeah. Well, what I like is, say, we're kind of talking DIY.
Yeah.
So guys can even book those through Got Fishing. You don't have to have a guide, but they can call you and you're going to help put a DIY trip together for them.
100%.
They can go out on their own, but you are going to help them avoid these mistakes. You're going to tell them what gear to take, what's essential, what size rod, what fish you're going to get into. All of that.
All of it. I mean,
Prepare you for
top
it.
to bottom. We send out a gear list that's specific to every trip that we do. On just like you were covering, the waders, the polypropylene, the rain hat, the staying covered from the sun or from the weather, you name it, all the way down to the type of line and the type of fish that they're going to be catching.
Yeah. That's awesome.
The beauty of that is kind of like we were talking about is that, yes, Got Fishing is there. Our core focus is sending people on, fishing adventures around the world, typically outfitted, with a guide, someone to show you what to do. And Patrick and I and you and a lot of the people that we hunt and fish with are more of that DIY mentality. But like we were talking today, there's a lot of hype behind being a DIYer. But if you didn't grow up in Montana or you didn't have a dad or an uncle that was out taking, you was kind of like, you can only get so much off social media. You can only get so much off of some of these seminars. You got to get out and experience. And so one of the advantages that we bring to the table with Got Fishing is that we have some incredible trips, very inexpensive. But what it does is it takes the beginner fly fisherman or the beginner adventurer and turns them into a pro. You can take a couple years and fish with a few buddies 5-10 times a year, or you can go to Alaska for 7 days and catch 300 fish, fight them on your 5, 6, 7 weight, and honestly come home a more proficient fly fisherman than you would have been if you would have just stayed the course fishing in your local ponds and rivers and streams for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Plus the gear education. Plus you were hanging out with a guide who kind of lives and breathes this, so he's answered a lot of your questions over that week, and you come out pretty knowledgeable with just one guided trip.
Oh, 100%. You take the guy that fishes one day a month. He might say, I've been fishing for 10 years.
Exactly.
Well, what does that mean? How many times, how many hours over that 10 years have you been there? It might take them all 10 years to experience 300 fish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like you said, you go up there for a week, you get 300 hits from a king salmon or a big rainbow trout. That experience of learning to set the hook, get the drift right, whatever it might be.
Absolutely. Like we were talking about, we're talking about fly fishing specifically, but fly fishing you can break up into a bunch of different components that are important. The presentation, fighting the fish, getting the line on the reel, all of that, it plays a really important part of it. And like you're saying, you can go out and dry fly and maybe put a couple nice fish on there. But what going to Alaska or some of these trips that we have is you may not be doing the presentation part as far as like a dry fly cast. But as soon as that fish picks that bug up or that bead up, it's fish on. And now you've got that whole other part of battling it, controlling my line, and getting it out from underneath your boot, and signaling your buddy. And there's a lot going on.
Oh, yeah.
You're already dreaming about the picture that's being taken, and it isn't even in the net yet. So
yeah, a trip like that expedites the learning curve exponentially.
It does. And what seems like, it might be costing you a couple $1,000s, and that's kind of against the DIY thing. Well, in my opinion, and I think Patrick agrees, that it actually catapults you into that DIY environment, just a more knowledgeable sportsman ready to go versus kind of a little bit here and a little bit there.
Well, if you don't have, say you're newer to fly fishing, and you don't have that buddy that is the expert, that is a good fly fisherman, to go out with and teach you and help you learn, then how do you learn?
Exactly.
I think everybody should pay for a guided trip at least once, because that's going to expedite the learning curve, right?
100%.
And I'll even go further and say that, every guide has different knowledge. I fish a river totally different than you might fish or Brian might fish. So, you're going to be able to pick that guide's brain. But then there's also, your home state might be Montana. Go on a day trip there and pick another guy's brain. And there's so much to learn. I haven't been fishing that long. I feel like I know a lot, but there's people that just crush me in knowledge, and things. So definitely, huge value. And you got a lot of questions you can ask a guide in a day.
100%.
Spay fishing, is another real popular one. So there's a lot of fly fishermen out there that definitely know how to fish with their 5, 6, and 8. But a lot of guys don't know how to truly spay fish. And I would be one of those. I know how to do it, but there's a lot of those casts that I don't have nailed. So I was just over on the Clearwater a couple weeks ago fishing with a friend of mine. And I was fishing with a 14-foot spay rod, doing some casts that I had never done before. Now, again, I can use YouTube. And I can run down to the river, and I can go back to YouTube. But then there's that, or you can just spend one day with somebody who really knows what they're doing. Trying to control the handle, bottom hand versus the top. Oh, yeah. And by the time I was done, I'd put 4 fish in the boat on a rod that I had never used before. I was out fishing guys that were conventional fishing.
Nice.
Because I had somebody who was actually showing me what to do. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You waste a lot of time YouTube and I was fortunate in my young years guiding in Colorado that I'd get done on a guide trip and I'd say goodbye to the clients and I'd go keep fishing. So it was like I was immersed in it and fortunate to fish, 15 hours a day, and I'd fish right up till dark and get up in the morning. But if you don't have that time or live right on a river, to YouTube something and drive an hour to your river and check things out, there's a lot of time and money getting spent, and it's totally
better than nothing for sure. And it's nice that we have those deals out there where you can watch a YouTube video, and there are people out there that are trying to help people advance their skills, but nothing beats actually getting out there and doing it.
Oh yeah, I don't know anybody proficient in their sport, whether it's fishing, hunting, whatever it might be, that hasn't spent money on guide service, coaching, practicing,
100%.
whatever. You got to surround yourself with people like Patrick just said, that are better than you, that know more than you, to glean that knowledge from them and that experience.
Absolutely. I mean, as soon as you think you know everything and you head out with, someone like Patrick, you quickly realize how little you do know.
You're going to be humbled.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you think you know that river, your home river, you got a buddy and you're like, dude, I'm going to show you fly fishing. You go down there and it's just crickets down there. And you're like, the river's just saying you don't know anything, You caught 20 fish here yesterday and we're not giving one up to you, So
we've all had days like that. Yeah. One day you think, man, you are the cat's meow.
Maybe I should write a book.
Yeah. Right. The next day you don't even know what the first letter of that book is.
Not so much. Yeah. It's a book. It's just a different title.
Yeah.
That's right.
How to have fun fishing while not catching.
Well, I really appreciate what you guys do.
We're pretty fortunate.
It's a cool service that you offer, and I like the fact that anybody can call you guys up and just get information, whether they can afford to book with you today or not. But the information you provide will help guys avoid some of the mistakes that we've talked about today, and
absolutely
just help them know what gear to put in their pack, what rod to take, and
even if someone was going to Alaska today, I would say, and you weren't going to go do a guided deal, I would say call us. I would say anyone who's going on an adventure trip, who, whether it's backpack, rafting, Alaska, Montana, I don't care. I would recommend that you give us a call, because if anything, we'll line you out on the proper gear. What you should expect, what you should be preparing for. And we don't care if you book a trip with us or not. This is just about fishermen and sportsmen taking care of each other and wanting, our fellow guy who's getting into it to genuinely go out there and have a blast, rip it up.
Yeah, but I can tell you guys this, if you do call them, you're going to want to book with you.
Got some cool trips.
Yeah, first time I talked to Brian, I wanted to book 6 trips right then.
Yeah. We're going to get you on one.
Man. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we've got a good one lined up.
We do. For you and a few others.
That's right. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, thanks for listening to the Gritty Angler Podcast, and stay gritty.
All right.
Although our native trout species are resilient fish, they are facing an uphill battle. Historically, there were 28 species of trout that lived in our waters, but 3 of those are extinct. According to Trout Unlimited's research, 13 of the remaining 25 species occupy less than 25% of their historic range. 6 are listed as either threatened or endangered. Renowned conservationist Shane Mahoney recently said, quote, "The natural resources in our country is what makes our country so great. We can have mountains and we can have streams and we can have forests. But if there's nothing living in them, they're meaningless." I agree. Let's not forget that our right to fish depends on habitat. Let's be good stewards of our fisheries and fight to protect and preserve our public lands. Our wildlife habitat depends on it.